So I've just cheated in my A-level exams and I'm cycling home and I'm kind of feeling this weird sensation of just pulled off a bit of a heist, a bit of mischief, slight sort of naughtiness to the brink of that's just wrongdoing. And I've got this pull of excitement as to I might have just found a real shortcut to getting ahead in my A-levels. And then I start having these doubts. I start thinking, okay, what if it goes really well? What if I get a really high result? What if I get 100% in the paper that I've just sat? You see, a couple of weeks earlier, I'd gone to see Colin Clegg, my lecturer at the time, real inspiration for me. And I wanted to ask him something that I was really struggling with. I was studying biology and sport and chemistry at the time, and there's a couple of topics that I was really struggling with. And ahead of the exams, I just thought, I'll just ask for some support. So I knocked on the door of the staff room, turned my head around the corner, and nobody was there. Okay, so I went over to Colin's desk and I thought I'll just leave him a note. Dear Mr. Clegg, I just wondered if I could ask you a few questions about a topic that I'm struggling with. I wonder if I can make an appointment. Steve Ingham. And then I look across to the side of his desk, and there's a pile of papers freshly printed out which say A-level biology year 1. I look across and think, that looks like the paper we're about to take. Nobody's about, and I just thought, well, no, that's not something I can do. I can't just steal one of those and have that for 2 weeks. I couldn't do that, and so I just finished writing my note, and that's the paper there. And in perhaps one of the quickest movements I've ever performed, I took one of those papers and I stuffed it in my bag, and I got out of that room as quickly as possible, trying to remove any facial expression that I'd just done something very naughty. You see, I'd gone into my A-level studies really on the back foot. I'd left school with only 3 GCSEs and had to spend another year retaking those GCSEs. So I had enough to be able to do A-levels. And actually, the A-levels that I ended up wanting to do, I didn't have a GCSE, and one of them was biology. And so right from the off, my first year of A-level studies, I was really struggling. And at best, I was a grade D or grade C student. I was fortunate enough to have met this man, Colin Clegg, who really inspired me to learn. He had such articulation and depth of knowledge of this subject that I just thought, I just want to be like that. But I was still struggling. I was going into my first year A-level exams, and these are important for university applications, for example. In that moment when I saw that paper, and I just thought, you know what, that is just the shortcut that I need. That's the sort of little helping hand that I need. And I know it's wrong, but actually that's just going to really help me get to grips with the subject. That'll help me get that foot up. And so for 2 weeks solid, I revised this paper. There was part of me that just thought, what if I've got it wrong and actually it's a different paper and that's for a different purpose? So I did some additional revision, but ultimately I looked through that paper and I thought, I don't know the definition of that particular word. I'm going to go and look it up. And so I was really ready, and I went into the exam just thinking that moment when I turn that paper over, that is going to be the moment that I just feel this sense of relief. Yes, this is a chance for me to properly cheat in this exam, or this is going to go really badly wrong. And as I turned it over, I thought, yes, that's the one. And I just sailed through that exam, and I just thought, this is going to be brilliant. And I left the exam and I got on my bike and I cycled home and had this sense of feeling of, oh, that's cheeky, that's naughty, but that could be brilliant. Then this growing realization as I started to reflect afterwards of, that could go really wrong actually. If I get 100%, then I'm going to get rumbled. I'm going to get found out. I'm going to get a tap on the shoulder and say, you've cheated in this exam. You've clearly cheated because you've got it all perfectly right. And so for a week afterwards, I was really genuinely worried. I thought, I'm going to get rumbled. I'm going to get found out. I'm going to get thrown off the course. And now I'm going to have to go and find a job that I don't really want to do. I thought that education was the answer for me, but actually now I'm probably going to have that closed off. And so came the day that the results were announced, and I could see a small group of people gathered around the notice board where the results were all printed off and listed. And I went over and walked up gingerly thinking, how's this going to go? First person that walked up to me was Colin Clegg, and he said, outstanding effort, fantastic, well done, student Ingham. And I just held my head down and said, thank you, Mr. Clegg, I worked hard for that. Sort of. And then I looked at the notice board and I saw my name at the top as Steve Ingham at the number 1. And I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. I've had the answers. And then I looked across at the percentage and it said 67%. 67%. And I looked at that and I was trying to pretend to look pleased, but at the same time thinking, what on earth? That should be 100. That should be 95 or 90%. At worst. And then I went away just completely puzzled, just thinking, well, that should be so much higher. I had the answers and I can only get 67%. So that started a process of me thinking deeply about what went wrong. I literally had the paper. I therefore had the answers available to me ahead of time. And yet I only got a high B. Yet some people can get an A. Some people can far exceed that, and they haven't got the paper in front of them for 2 weeks in advance. They didn't cheat. So what went wrong? So once I got the paper back and I could see what marks I'd achieved, and then I got the mark scheme alongside it, and I could see that I dropped a point here, I dropped a point there, whether it's just 1 here or 2 there, a 4-mark question, and I'd only got 2 marks. And then I started to look, well, I've only put 2 points down. Okay, well, it makes sense then potentially that I need to put at least 4 things down to be able to answer the question adequately. There were instances where describe or explain or evaluate, and I had done an alternative to that when I hadn't described it properly or when I hadn't evaluated it properly. And so therefore I might have had the right information put down, but I hadn't put it in the right way. And then also I started to look at the long answers, the 2 long questions at the back of the paper that take time. They're the 15-mark questions. And I dropped quite a few marks on those. And that was more a fact that I'd actually got tired. So during a 3-hour exam, my writing fatigue had kicked in. And towards the back end of an exam, I haven't just been able to put the information down. So there was a big breath in over the summer of 1992 for me, where I just thought, well, if I want to try and do this well, I'm going to have to not only just know my subject, but I'm also going to have to know how I deliver it in an exam. And therefore, I'm going to have to think about the craft of being able to pass that particular performance test. And what was really driving me at the time was somewhat of an anticipation of embarrassment that I didn't want to go from a high B to a medium C. I didn't want to go from my first year A-level result and actually go backwards over that time. And that was an embarrassment and a duty and a responsibility to my tutor, Colin Clegg, who had that moment of pride of thinking, this student's got it. This student has finally stepped up to the plate. And so for that year, then I started to work, but work in a smarter way of thinking, well, I want to be the best prepared I can be for that exam that's coming up. And so that means learning my subject, learning the deep knowledge and acquiring it and making it stick so that I can repeat it, but then developing the skill and the craft of exam performance. What is it that's required of me for that assessment? What are the components? What are the things I need to demonstrate? I can know my stuff, but how can I deliver it on the day? And this started to be a systematic method that I worked at throughout the year. Now, I'm pleased to say that I got the exam results that I needed, albeit that the catalyst for that was that I cheated, and that caused me to go into a sort of a spiral of deep shame that propelled me to thinking differently about how you perform. And many years later, after I'd gone through my university education, I spent a term working back at the College of FE with Colin Clegg, and I was teaching A-levels to students, and I sat in the staff room with Colin at his desk, and I was leaning on the spot of his desk where the exams were that day that I stole the paper. And I said to Colin, I've got something I want to tell you. I want to let you know that my first year A-level biology exam, I cheated this very spot. I stole a paper, I stuffed it in my bag, and I revised it for 2 weeks solid. And I cheated in the exam. And he picked up his book and he looked through and he said, "Oh, okay, yeah, you did quite well. You did quite well in that exam." He said, "So you cheated, did you? What did you learn?" And I was really humbled by that question of thinking, well, he could have just told me off because he was my lecturer a few years before. But no, he took a moment to actually take the lesson out of the incident. And I said to him, look, I know that I had to develop my knowledge, I had to think about covering the ground of actually knowing the stuff, but I also had to think about what was coming up, what was on the curriculum, and therefore what do I not need to revise. But also the exam technique, you have to deliver that under the pressure. You have to think about understanding how questions work. You have to think about the use of time. You have to think about the fatigue, literally building up some fitness in your writing muscles. And he said, okay, well, that's useful potentially for exam performance. Did that help you during your university education? I said, yeah, absolutely. Every single exam that I went into, I thought in the same way. He said, well, that sounds good that actually that's helped you too. And then he asked me a really perceptive question. It was, has this realization helped you in any other way? And I said, it has actually. It's helped me with my own sport. It's helped me start to deconstruct performance of thinking, well, I can be fit in certain ways, but I've actually got to be able to deliver it under race conditions too. And it's actually got me curious as to thinking about the different components of race preparation and race delivery. And I can work on the strengths and weaknesses. It sounds like you've got a really useful technique that you can use. And he was right. That performance thinking ultimately has served as the bedrock of nearly all the work that I've ever done working with a sport or an individual, of profiling what's required to perform under pressure when it matters most and preparing for that. What I've shared with you today is about performance determinants and how I came to realizing, valuing, and then later in my career developing deep technical skills to be able to deconstruct performance so that you're best placed from an evidence point of view to be able to work on what matters most. In later videos, I'm going to share with you further insights about how you can use this technique in your life.